Welcome to Chapter 7, Animation. This chapter will run through the basic steps in creating a simple animation in Blender. We will cover the different ways of creating keyframes and adjusting animation curves. The first thing we need to do is switch to the animation layout. Click the Screen Layout button and select Animation. The animation layout will have all the necessary panels we need for animating objects. We have the timeline, the dope sheet, and the graph editor. Let's talk about the timeline. The timeline displays the frame range. You can specify the start and end frame by clicking and dragging on these buttons or by entering a value. It also displays the current frame. The current frame is where the time slider currently is. You can scrub the timeline by clicking and dragging the left mouse button. Notice how the current frame changes as you do this. You can zoom in and out by scrolling the mouse wheel. Next to it are the playback controls and the automatic keyframe insertion button. These are the parts of the timeline that we'll use the most. This panel is the dope sheet. Keyframes are displayed here in hierarchical order. This is where you adjust and duplicate keyframes. And below, it is the graph editor where you tweak animation curves to refine animations. Let's go ahead and animate a bouncing ball. Set the end frame in the timeline to 24 and zoom in a bit. Make sure the current frame is set to 1. Delete everything in the 3D view and create a sphere. Move the sphere up. This will be its first position. Now we need to set a keyframe. There are a couple of methods to achieve this. One is by pressing I to open the Insert Keyframe menu. Let's select Lock Rot Scale since we're going to animate its location. Notice that new information is displayed in the dope sheet and graph editor. If you move the time slider, a yellow bar will appear where the keyframe is set. Press N to open the 3D view properties. The location, rotation, and scale values will be in green. This means that these values are keyed. If you move the time slider to where the keyframe is, the highlight will turn yellow. Another way to create keyframes is by activating the automatic keyframe insertion button. Move to frame 12 and move the sphere downwards. Notice that the values of the sphere's location, rotation, and scale turn yellow. This means that a keyframe has been created in that frame. Turning on the automatic keyframe insertion button records any change you make on an object. Let's see what we have so far. Click on the Jump to Start button in the playback controls and then click Play. Our sphere now travels from point A to point B. What we need to do now is duplicate the first keyframe and move it to frame 24. Zoom in the dope sheet by clicking and dragging on this bar so we can have a clearer view of our current keyframes. Here, keyframes are displayed in hierarchical order. Selecting a keyframe at the top selects all the keyframes below it. You can move keyframes by right-clicking and dragging or the grab tool hotkey G. Select the first keyframe and press Shift plus D to duplicate it. Move it to frame 24. Let's play what we have so far. The sphere now bounces up and down, but something about it is wrong. A bouncing ball should spend more time in the air and only slightly touch the ground before being airborne again. To achieve this effect, we need to modify its animation curve. In the graph editor, select Z location and press Home to zoom in on the curve. Only keyframes with changing values will have curves. In our case, we animated the sphere in the Z-axis, therefore we have a curve only in the Z location. To tweak curves, you can either move keyframes or Bezier handles using the grab tool. For example, select Y location. Select this keyframe and move it upwards. If you play the animation, the sphere now has value in the y-axis. Let's undo this action. Currently, each keyframe has Bezier interpolation. This means that they have equal acceleration and deceleration from one keyframe to the next. If you want your animation to have constant speed all throughout, select all the keyframes of the Z location, go to Key, Interpolation Mode, Linear. Play the animation. It now travels from one keyframe to the next in constant speed. Let's set it back to Bezier. Let's simulate how a bouncing ball behaves in real life. Select the keyframe in frame 12. Click on Key, Handle Type, Free. This allows us to independently tweak each Bezier handle of the keyframe. Select this handle and move it upwards. Do the same to the other one. Play the animation. Now it has a more realistic bouncing effect. Moreover, you can also animate modifiers in Blender. Let's give our bouncing ball a cartoony effect by adding a simple deform modifier. Click on Stretch. In frame 1, set the deform to 0. Right-click and insert keyframe. Assuming you still have automatic keyframe insertion activated, move to frame 10 and change the deform to 0.5. This should automatically be recorded. Move to frame 12, change deform to -0.25. Duplicate the keyframe in frame 10 and move it to frame 14. And then duplicate frame 1 and then move it to frame 24. Play the animation. There we have a simple bouncing ball animation. Thank you and see you in the next chapter.